Let's be honest, genius rarely looks the way we expect it to. We have this image in our heads, the composed, articulate person who always says the right thing at the right moment, who moves through the world with effortless clarity and purpose. And then there's the actual reality of how exceptionally sharp minds tend to operate. They misplace things constantly. They laugh at jokes nobody else has caught up to yet. They go silent in the middle of conversations because something just occurred to them that has nothing to do with what's being discussed. They seem, from the outside, a little odd. And here is what psychology keeps finding when it studies the cognitive habits of genuinely high-functioning minds. The strangeness is not incidental. It is not the cost of being smart. In many cases, it is the mechanism. The habits that look like quirks are often the habits doing the most sophisticated cognitive work. So, if you have ever been told you're a little unusual, a little too much, a little hard to follow, stay with this. Because what other people have been calling weird, research has been calling something else entirely. The first strange habit is that you are a deeply inconsistent person, and that inconsistency is a feature, not a flaw. On some days you are extraordinary. Focused, fast, creative, alive with ideas, capable of producing work that genuinely surprises even you. And on other days, you can barely function. Basic tasks feel enormous. Your brain refuses to cooperate. You sit in front of something simple and feel like a completely different person from the one who handled something far more complex yesterday without breaking a sweat. Most people interpret this inconsistency as unreliability, as proof that they can't be trusted with their own potential. But cognitive psychologists studying variability in high-functioning individuals have identified something they call cognitive resource cycling, the pattern by which minds, operating at the higher end of complexity, consume mental resources at a significantly faster rate than average and require correspondingly deeper recovery. In other words, the same brain that can do extraordinary things is the same brain that crashes harder afterward. Your bad days are not evidence that you were wrong about yourself on your good ones. They are the neurological invoice for what you produced. Genius is not a flat line. It is a wave. And the people who are secretly brilliant have simply learned, or are still learning, to stop being ashamed of the trough. The second strange habit is that you are a remarkably bad explainer of your own best thinking. Someone asks you how you arrived at an idea that everyone agrees is exceptional, and you genuinely cannot account for it. You say things like, "It just came to me," or "I'm not sure," "It felt right," or "I don't really know how to explain it." And people assume this means the idea wasn't that sophisticated, that it was luck or accident. But research in creative cognition tells a different story. Psychologists, studying insight, the sudden arrival of a solution or idea that wasn't reached through deliberate step-by-step reasoning, have found that insight-based thinking is processed primarily in the deactivation right hemisphere of the brain, through pathways that operate largely outside conscious awareness. The idea arrives fully formed because it was assembled in the background, through a process that bypassed the verbal, logical, sequential centers of the brain entirely. This is why you can't explain it. Not because nothing happened, because what happened was deeper than language. The inability to narrate your best thinking is not a sign of intellectual shallowness. It is often a sign of exactly the opposite. The third strange habit is that you are unusually sensitive to environments. Not emotionally fragile, though people sometimes confuse the two, but genuinely, physically attuned to the conditions around you in a way that significantly affects your ability to think. The wrong kind of noise, and your concentration simply doesn't exist. The lighting is slightly off, and something in you can't settle. A conversation happened 2 hours ago that left a residue of tension in the room, and you can feel it even though nobody mentioned it, and nobody else seems to notice. This environmental sensitivity tends to get dismissed as fussiness or high maintenance. But neuroscientists studying the relationship between sensory processing and cognitive function have found that individuals with higher levels of what they call sensory processing sensitivity, a trait identified by researcher Elaine Aron, are not just more easily bothered by their environments. They are processing environmental information more deeply and at a higher resolution than average. The same nervous system that makes the wrong conditions intolerable is also the nervous system that picks up on things other people miss entirely. Your sensitivity to the environment is not a weakness in your wiring. It is evidence of how much your wiring is taking in. The fourth strange habit is that you find it almost impossible to be dishonest even when honesty is inconvenient, socially awkward, or clearly not what the other person wanted to hear. Not because you have no social awareness. You likely have more than most. But because something in you physically resists the act of saying something you know not to be true. You'll go quiet before you'll go along with something false. You'll redirect before you'll agree with something you think is wrong. You'll tolerate the discomfort of an awkward silence, rather than offer a reassurance you don't actually feel. Psychologists, studying intellectual integrity as a cognitive trait, have found that this compulsive honesty is closely associated with a high need for cognitive consistency. The internal drive to keep thoughts, words, and beliefs aligned. Minds that are wired for precision find the misalignment of saying one thing while knowing another to be genuinely dissonant, almost uncomfortable at a physical level. Your inability to perform a false agreement is not social rigidity. It is your mind insisting on the same standard of accuracy in conversation that it applies to everything else. If any of this is landing somewhere, you recognize something you've always sensed about yourself, but never quite had the language for. Subscribe to this channel. This is the kind of psychology that changes how you see your own mind, and there is so much more here. The fifth strange habit is that you experience boredom more intensely than the people around you, and that intensity has consequences that look, from the outside, like restlessness or immaturity, but are actually something far more interesting. When you are genuinely understimulated, the feeling isn't mild. It isn't just a preference for something more engaging. It is a pronounced, almost uncomfortable internal pressure that pushes you towards stimulation, novelty, disruption, anything that demands more of your brain than what's currently in front of you. You have probably done things specifically to escape boredom that made no logical sense to anyone watching, taken risks that weren't necessary, started things that didn't need to be started, complicated situations that were perfectly simple. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who spent decades mapping the conditions under which human minds perform at their highest level, found that the experience of boredom is fundamentally the experience of a mind whose capacity exceeds the demands being placed on it. The gap between what a mind can do and what it is currently being asked to do produces a specific kind of frustration, one that highly capable minds experience more acutely because the gap, for them, is wider. Your boredom is not a character flaw. It is your brain telling you it needs a problem worthy of what it can actually do, and when it doesn't find one, it creates one, which is either how trouble starts or how something genuinely new gets made. Often, it's both. Here's what all 5 of these habits have in common when you look at them honestly. Not one of them looks impressive from the outside. Inconsistency, inarticulate thinking, environmental fussiness, uncomfortable honesty, and dramatic boredom. None of these are qualities that get celebrated in performance reviews or praised in social situations. And yet every single one of them is documented in the research on creativity, cognition, and exceptional intellectual function as a pattern that appears with striking regularity in people whose minds operate at a level most people never access. The reason genius so often goes unrecognized, including by the person who carries it, is that it rarely arrives in the form we were taught to look for. It arrives in the form of a person who seems a little strange, a little hard to categorize, a little too much in some ways and not enough in others. A person who has spent years quietly wondering whether the way their mind works is a problem to be fixed. It isn't. It never was. It is simply a mind doing things in the way that minds like that do things. And the sooner you stop apologizing for how yours works, the sooner it gets to do what it was actually built for. Which of these 5 felt most like yours? Let us know in the comments, and if you know someone who would see themselves in this, share it with them. Sometimes, the most useful thing you can do for someone is hand them the language for something they've always known but never been able to say. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.